The earthquake that changed everything. Sarah Martinez had always been fascinated by ancient civilizations. As a 28-year-old archaeologist from the University of California, she had spent the last 5 years working on various dig sites across Central America. Her expertise in Mayan ruins had earned her a reputation as one of the most promising young researchers in her field. When the opportunity arose to join an expedition to explore a newly discovered temple complex in the remote mountains of Guatemala, she didn't hesitate for a second. The team consisted of 12 members, including fellow archaeologists, graduate students, and local guides who knew the treacherous terrain like the back of their hands. Dr. Robert Chen, the expedition leader, had been planning this dig for over 2 years. Satellite imagery had revealed what appeared to be a massive temple structure buried beneath centuries of jungle growth and volcanic ash. The site was located in one of the most isolated regions of the country, accessible only by helicopter or a grueling 3-day trek through dense rainforest. Sarah arrived at the base camp on a humid Tuesday morning in March. The camp was a collection of sturdy tents and temporary structures nestled in a clearing that the team had carved out of the jungle. Solar panels powered their essential equipment, while generators provided backup power for their computers and communication devices. The nearest town was over 50 miles away, and cell phone coverage was non-existent. Their only connection to the outside world was a satellite phone that Dr. Chen kept for emergencies. The work began immediately. The temple complex was even more impressive than the satellite images had suggested. Initial excavations revealed intricate stone carvings and pottery fragments that dated back over 1,000 years. Sarah found herself assigned to the main temple structure, a massive pyramid-like building that rose nearly 60 feet above the jungle floor. Her job was to carefully excavate and document a series of chambers that ground-penetrating radar had detected beneath the temple's base. The excavation work was slow and methodical. Each day, Sarah and her team would carefully remove layers of soil and debris, using brushes and small tools to avoid damaging any artifacts they might uncover. They worked in shifts to avoid the intense midday heat, starting before dawn and continuing until the afternoon rains made outdoor work impossible. Despite the challenging conditions, Sarah had never felt more alive. This was the kind of discovery that archaeologists dreamed about their entire careers. After 2 weeks of careful excavation, they had uncovered the entrance to what appeared to be a burial chamber deep within the temple's foundation. The opening was barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through, and it descended at a steep angle into complete darkness. Dr. Chen decided that Sarah, being the smallest member of the team and the most experienced in confined spaces, would be the first to explore the chamber. Sarah prepared meticulously for the descent. She equipped herself with a helmet-mounted LED light, a backup flashlight, and a small emergency beacon that could transmit her location in case of trouble. The beacon was a new piece of technology that the university had recently purchased for dangerous excavations. It could send a distress signal that would be picked up by satellites and relayed to emergency services, though in such a remote location, help would be hours away at best. She also carried a digital camera to document any findings, a portable oxygen meter to check air quality, and enough water and energy bars to last several hours. A safety rope was attached to her harness, with the other end secured to a sturdy anchor point at the entrance. The plan was simple. She would descend into the chamber, conduct a preliminary survey, and return to the surface within 2 hours. As Sarah began her descent, the walls around her gradually changed from rough stone to smooth, carved surfaces. Her light revealed intricate hieroglyphs and painted murals that had been preserved in the dry environment of the sealed chamber. The artwork was unlike anything she had seen before, depicting scenes of daily life, religious ceremonies, and astronomical observations that could provide invaluable insights into Mayan culture. The chamber opened into a larger space about 20 feet underground. Sarah found herself in what was clearly a burial tomb, complete with stone sarcophagi, ceramic vessels, and golden artifacts that gleamed in the light of her headlamp. The air was stale but breathable, and her oxygen meter showed acceptable levels. She began photographing everything, knowing that each image could contribute to their understanding of this ancient civilization. As she worked, Sarah noticed that the chamber extended further than she had initially thought. A narrow passageway led deeper into the temple's foundation, and her curiosity got the better of her. She decided to explore just a little further, reasoning that she still had plenty of time before she needed to return to the surface. The passageway led to an even more spectacular discovery, a series of connected chambers, each more elaborate than the last. One room contained what appeared to be an ancient astronomical observatory, with stone instruments and star charts carved into the walls. Another held hundreds of ceramic vessels, many still containing preserved offerings of corn, beans, and other foods. Sarah lost track of time as she documented these incredible findings. Her excitement overcame her usual caution, and she ventured deeper into the complex than she had originally planned. It was only when she noticed that her headlamp was beginning to dim that she realized how long she had been underground. She began making her way back toward the entrance, following the safety rope that would guide her to the surface. But as she moved through the narrow passageway, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold, a deep, rumbling noise that seemed to come from the earth itself. The walls around her began to shake, and dust started falling from the ceiling. Guatemala sits on one of the most seismically active regions in the world, where several tectonic plates meet and create frequent earthquakes. What Sarah was experiencing was a magnitude 6.8 earthquake, powerful enough to cause significant damage to buildings and infrastructure. For someone trapped underground in an ancient stone structure, it was potentially fatal. The shaking intensified, and Sarah could hear the grinding and cracking of stone above her. She tried to move faster toward the exit, but the earthquake made it difficult to maintain her balance. Chunks of debris began falling around her, and she realized with growing horror that the passageway was beginning to collapse. She made it to the main burial chamber just as a massive section of the ceiling gave way. The safety rope, which had been her lifeline to the surface, was severed by falling stones. Sarah dove behind one of the stone sarcophagi as the chamber filled with dust and the deafening sound of collapsing rock. When the shaking finally stopped, Sarah found herself in complete darkness. Her headlamp had been knocked off during the collapse, and though she searched frantically with her hands, she couldn't locate it in the rubble. She activated her backup flashlight and surveyed her situation with growing dread. The entrance to the chamber was completely blocked by tons of fallen stone. The passageway she had used to reach the deeper chambers was also sealed. Sarah was trapped in a space roughly the size of a small bedroom with no apparent way out. The air was thick with dust, making it difficult to breathe, and she could taste the grit in her mouth. She tried to remain calm and think logically about her situation. Her emergency beacon was still functioning, and she activated it immediately, hoping that its signal would somehow reach the surface despite the tons of rock above her. She had about half a bottle of water and 3 energy bars, which would need to last until rescue arrived. Above ground, the earthquake had caused devastating damage to the excavation site. Several tents had collapsed, equipment was scattered and broken, and a portion of the temple structure had crumbled. Dr. Chen and the rest of the team had taken shelter during the quake, and it was only after the shaking stopped that they realized Sarah was missing. When they reached the excavation site, they found the entrance to the burial chamber completely sealed by fallen stones. The team worked frantically to clear the debris, but it quickly became apparent that they would need heavy equipment to move the massive blocks that had fallen. Their satellite phone had been damaged in the earthquake, making it impossible to call for help immediately. Meanwhile, Sarah tried to make herself as comfortable as possible in her stone prison. She used her flashlight sparingly to conserve the battery, spending most of her time in complete darkness. The temperature in the chamber was relatively stable, which was fortunate, but the humidity was oppressive, and she found herself sweating constantly despite being motionless. She rationed her water carefully, taking only small sips when absolutely necessary. The energy bars would provide some nutrition, but she knew that her supplies would last only a few days at most. Her main hope was that her emergency beacon was functioning and that someone, somewhere, would receive her distress signal and organize a rescue operation. As the hours passed, Sarah tried to stay positive by focusing on the incredible archaeological discovery she had made. Even if she didn't survive, the documentation she had gathered would provide valuable insights into Mayan civilization. She thought about her family back in California, her colleagues at the university, and all the other excavations she hoped to participate in the future. The emergency beacon continued to transmit its signal every few minutes, sending out a digital cry for help that included Sarah's GPS coordinates and identification information. The device was designed to operate for up to 30 days on its internal battery, giving rescuers a substantial window in which to locate and extract her. What Sarah didn't know was that her beacon signal was indeed being received by a military satellite network that monitored emergency frequencies in remote regions. The signal had been logged and was working its way through various emergency response systems, but the remote location of the dig site meant that organizing a rescue operation would take time. Dr. Chen and the team continued their desperate efforts to clear the collapsed entrance, but they were making little progress with hand tools and no heavy equipment. As night fell on the first day, they realized that they would need outside help to reach Sarah. 2 team members began the dangerous journey through the jungle to the nearest town, hoping to find communication equipment and organize a proper rescue operation. Deep underground, Sarah marked the passage of time by the dimming of her emergency beacon's LED indicator. She tried to sleep to conserve energy, but the hard stone floor and the stress of her situation made rest nearly impossible. The darkness was absolute when she turned off her flashlight, and she found herself thinking about sunlight, fresh air, and all the simple pleasures of life above ground that she had always taken for granted. By the end of the second day, her water was nearly gone, and she had eaten one of her energy bars. She was beginning to feel the effects of dehydration, including headaches and dizziness. The air in the chamber was becoming increasingly stale, and she worried about carbon dioxide buildup in the enclosed space. Above ground, help was finally on the way. Dr. Chen's team members had reached the town and contacted the university, which had immediately alerted Guatemalan authorities and the U.S. Embassy. A rescue operation was being organized. But the remote location and the scale of the collapse meant that it would take time to transport the necessary equipment and personnel to the site. The fight for survival. By the third day underground, Sarah's situation had become critical. Her water supply was exhausted, and she was experiencing severe dehydration symptoms. Her mouth felt like sandpaper, her lips were cracked and bleeding, and her head pounded with each heartbeat. The single energy bar she had consumed provided minimal nutrition, and her stomach cramped with hunger. The emergency beacon continued its steady transmission, its small LED light blinking every few minutes in the absolute darkness. Sarah had positioned it carefully on top of one of the stone sarcophagi, hoping that the elevated position might help the signal penetrate through the layers of rock above her. She clung to the device as her only connection to the outside world, checking its status obsessively despite knowing that its battery would last for weeks. Above ground, the rescue operation had finally begun in earnest. A team of specialists from Guatemala's emergency response unit had arrived at the site, along with representatives from the U.S. Embassy and a structural engineer who specialized in collapse rescues. Heavy equipment had been transported to the location by helicopter, including pneumatic drills, hydraulic jacks, and portable generators to power the operation. The rescuers faced a daunting challenge. The earthquake had caused a section of the ancient temple to collapse, creating a debris field of massive stone blocks, some weighing several tons. The stones were fitted together so tightly by centuries of settling that removing them required extreme care to avoid triggering a secondary collapse that could crush Sarah or block access routes even further. Dr. Chen worked closely with the rescue team, providing detailed maps of the excavation site and explaining the layout of the burial chambers based on ground-penetrating radar surveys. The team established that Sarah was most likely trapped in the main burial chamber, approximately 20 feet below the surface and protected by the stone construction of the ancient Mayan builders. The structural engineer, Maria Valdez, had experience with similar rescues in earthquake zones throughout Central America. She explained to Dr. Chen that their main challenge was not just reaching Sarah, but ensuring that the rescue operation itself didn't cause additional collapses. Each stone had to be carefully evaluated, stabilized, and removed in a specific sequence to maintain the integrity of the remaining structure. Meanwhile, Sarah was fighting her own battle for survival in the darkness below. Without water, she knew that her body could survive only a few more days at most. She tried to conserve energy by remaining as still as possible, but the cramped conditions and hard stone floor made it nearly impossible to rest comfortably. Her legs had begun to swell from poor circulation, and she developed painful pressure sores from lying on the unforgiving rock surface. The stale air in the chamber was becoming increasingly difficult to breathe. With no ventilation, the oxygen levels were gradually declining while carbon dioxide from her respiration accumulated. Sarah found herself taking deeper breaths and feeling lightheaded, classic symptoms of oxygen deprivation in an enclosed space. Despite her deteriorating physical condition, Sarah's mind remained remarkably clear. She used her archaeological training to study her surroundings, even in the limited light of her carefully rationed flashlight. The burial chamber contained incredible artifacts that could revolutionize understanding of Mayan burial practices and religious beliefs. She made mental notes of everything she observed, determined that her potential sacrifice would at least contribute to human knowledge. The rescue operation above ground was proceeding methodically, but slowly. Working around the clock in 12-hour shifts, the team had managed to clear several tons of debris from the collapse area. However, they were still several feet away from reaching the burial chamber, and each stone they removed revealed additional layers of rubble beneath. The work was dangerous and exhausting. The unstable nature of the collapse meant that rescuers had to work carefully to avoid creating vibrations that might trigger additional rockfalls. Every few hours, they would pause their efforts to listen for any sounds from below, hoping to hear some indication that Sarah was still alive. On the fourth day, Sarah made a decision that would prove crucial to her survival. She realized that the ceramic vessels in the burial chamber might contain liquids that, while ancient, could provide some hydration. Using her flashlight carefully, she examined several large jars that appeared to be intact. Many contained dried corn, beans, and other organic matter that had been preserved by the dry environment of the sealed chamber. In one particularly large vessel, Sarah discovered what appeared to be honey that had crystallized over the centuries. Honey is one of the few foods that never spoils due to its natural antibacterial properties and low moisture content. Though the substance was rock hard, Sarah was able to break off small pieces and dissolve them slowly in her mouth. The sugars provided immediate energy, and the small amount of moisture helped alleviate her parched throat. This discovery gave Sarah renewed hope and provided the calories she needed to maintain her strength. She rationed the crystallized honey carefully, taking only small amounts every few hours. The natural sugars helped stabilize her blood glucose levels and provided her brain with the fuel it needed to think clearly about her situation. Another significant discovery was a small pool of water that had collected in a depression in the chamber floor. The water had apparently seeped through microscopic cracks in the stone over many years, creating a reservoir about the size of a dinner plate. The water was stagnant and had an earthy taste, but Sarah carefully tested it and determined that it was relatively clean. She drank sparingly from this source, knowing that it represented her best chance for staying hydrated until rescue arrived. The rescue team above ground had been working for nearly a week when they achieved their first major breakthrough. Using ground-penetrating radar, they detected what appeared to be a void space that matched the dimensions of the burial chamber shown on Dr. Chen's excavation maps. More importantly, they began receiving stronger signals from Sarah's emergency beacon, indicating that they were getting closer to her location. Maria Valdez determined that they were within approximately 8 feet of the chamber, but the remaining debris included several massive capstones that had fallen from the temple's roof structure. These stones were too large and heavy to be moved safely without specialized equipment, and bringing a crane to the remote jungle location would require building an access road through miles of dense forest. Instead, the team decided to attempt a different approach. Using portable hydraulic jacks and a technique called cribbing, they would gradually lift each massive stone while building a support structure underneath it. This process would allow them to create a stable tunnel through the debris field without removing the heaviest pieces entirely. The work was incredibly dangerous and required absolute precision. Each hydraulic jack had to be positioned exactly right to distribute the weight evenly, and the wooden cribs that supported the lifted stones had to be strong enough to prevent collapse if a jack failed. The process was also extremely slow, with progress measured in inches rather than feet. During her second week underground, Sarah's physical condition continued to deteriorate despite her rationing efforts. The honey had provided crucial calories, but she was still consuming far fewer nutrients than her body needed. She had lost significant weight, and her muscles were beginning to atrophy from lack of movement in the confined space. More concerning was her mental state. The isolation, stress, and physical deprivation were taking their toll on her psychological well-being. She found herself talking aloud to maintain some sense of human connection, carrying on conversations with family members and colleagues as if they were present in the chamber with her. Sarah also began experiencing hallucinations, particularly auditory ones where she thought she could hear voices or machinery from above ground. Sometimes these seemed so real that she would call out for help, straining her already damaged voice. She learned to distinguish between real sounds and hallucinations by listening for the rhythmic pattern of the rescue equipment, which had a distinctive mechanical cadence. To maintain her sanity, Sarah established a strict daily routine. She would wake up at what she estimated was dawn, do gentle stretching exercises to maintain circulation, carefully consume her rationed honey and water, and then spend hours mentally reviewing everything she could remember about archaeology, her family, and her life experiences. This mental exercise helped keep her mind sharp and provided a sense of structure in her timeless underground prison. The rescue team faced their own psychological challenges. Working in dangerous conditions for extended periods while knowing that someone's life hung in the balance created enormous stress for everyone involved. The team members rotated regularly to prevent fatigue, and counselors were brought in to help them cope with the pressure. Dr. Chen remained at the site throughout the entire operation, feeling responsible for Sarah's predicament and determined to see the rescue through to completion. He had barely slept since the earthquake, and his colleagues were concerned about his health. However, his detailed knowledge of the excavation site and his archaeological expertise were crucial to the rescue effort. As the second week progressed, the rescue team finally began making significant progress. Their tunnel through the debris field was nearly complete, and they estimated that they were within just a few feet of breaking through to the burial chamber. The signals from Sarah's emergency beacon were now strong enough to pinpoint her exact location within the chamber. However, the final phase of the rescue would be the most dangerous. Breaking through the last layer of debris risked destabilizing the entire rescue tunnel and potentially causing a catastrophic collapse. The team would need to work with extreme caution to ensure that their efforts to save Sarah didn't inadvertently seal her fate. Maria Valdez spent hours calculating load distributions and stress points, trying to determine the safest way to create an opening large enough for Sarah to escape through. The plan they developed involved creating a small pilot hole first, which would allow them to assess the stability of the remaining structure and establish communication with Sarah before attempting a full breach. On the 15th day of Sarah's imprisonment, the rescue team was finally ready to attempt the breakthrough. Using a diamond-tipped core drill powered by a portable generator, they began cutting through the final layer of stone debris. The work proceeded slowly and carefully, with frequent stops to check for any signs of structural movement. When the drill bit finally broke through into the burial chamber, the rescuers were greeted by a sight that both relieved and concerned them. Sarah's emergency beacon was visible in the small hole, still blinking steadily after more than 2 weeks of continuous operation. However, there was no immediate sign of Sarah herself, and the rescuers feared the worst. Dr. Chen called down through the hole, his voice echoing in the chamber below. For several terrifying minutes, there was no response. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, came the weak but unmistakable sound of Sarah's voice, barely above a whisper but clearly saying, "I'm here. I'm still alive." The SEALs arrive. The moment Dr. Chen heard Sarah's weak voice from below, the entire rescue site erupted in controlled celebration. After 15 days of grueling work, they had finally established contact with the trapped archaeologist. However, their relief was tempered by the realization that the most dangerous phase of the rescue was still ahead of them. Maria Valdez quickly assessed the situation through the small pilot hole they had created. Using a fiber optic camera, the team was able to get their first visual confirmation of Sarah's condition. She appeared to be conscious and responsive, though clearly weakened by her ordeal. More importantly, the camera revealed that the burial chamber had remained structurally intact despite the massive collapse above. The rescue team faced a critical decision. The pilot hole was only 6 inches in diameter, far too small for Sarah to escape through. Enlarging it to create a rescue shaft would require removing additional debris and risked triggering another collapse. The alternative was to continue with their original plan of clearing a horizontal tunnel, but this would take several more days of dangerous work. While the team debated their options, Sarah's condition was deteriorating rapidly. Though she had managed to survive for over 2 weeks on crystallized honey and seepage water, her body was reaching the limits of its endurance. Through the small opening, the rescuers could see that she was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and showing signs of hypothermia from prolonged exposure to the cool, damp conditions underground. The rescue team immediately began lowering supplies through the pilot hole. Medical personnel sent down IV fluids, high-energy nutrition supplements, blankets, and emergency medical supplies. A fiber-optic communication line allowed them to maintain constant contact with Sarah and monitor her vital signs remotely. Dr. Sarah Martinez, speaking through the communication line in a voice that was barely audible, described her incredible ordeal. She explained how she had discovered the honey in the ancient vessels and how the natural seepage had provided just enough water to keep her alive. Her archaeological training had not only led to her predicament, but had also provided the knowledge she needed to survive in the ancient chamber. As news of the successful contact spread, the rescue operation attracted international attention. Archaeological communities around the world followed the story closely, not just because of Sarah's plight, but because of the incredible discoveries she had made in the burial chambers. Her preliminary descriptions of the artifacts and murals suggested that this could be one of the most significant archaeological finds in recent history. However, the media attention also brought unwanted complications. The remote jungle location became crowded with news crews, government officials, and curiosity seekers, making it difficult for the rescue teams to work efficiently. the Guatemalan government was forced to establish a security perimeter around the site to maintain focus on the rescue operation. Meanwhile, the rescue team was facing a new challenge. The extended timeline of the operation had strained their equipment and personnel to the breaking point. Several key pieces of machinery had broken down from continuous use in the humid jungle environment, and replacement parts were difficult to obtain in the remote location. It was at this critical juncture that an unexpected source of help arrived. The U.S. Embassy had been monitoring the situation closely, not just because Sarah was an American citizen, but because the archaeological site was of significant scientific importance. When it became clear that the rescue was reaching a critical phase, the embassy contacted the Pentagon to request specialized assistance. The call went to the Naval Special Warfare Command, where a team of Navy SEALs was conducting training exercises in maritime archaeology and underwater rescue operations in the Caribbean. These elite operators had experience with confined space rescues and access to specialized equipment that could be crucial to Sarah's survival. Commander Jake Morrison, a 15-year veteran of the SEALs with extensive experience in rescue operations, received the mission briefing while his team was training off the coast of Belize. The SEALs had sophisticated ground-penetrating radar equipment, precision-cutting tools, and most importantly, experience working in high-stress rescue situations where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. The SEAL team arrived at the archaeological site by helicopter 18 days after Sarah had become trapped. Commander Morrison quickly assessed the situation and realized that the civilian rescue teams had done excellent work under extremely difficult circumstances. However, he also identified several ways that military expertise and equipment could accelerate the rescue process. The SEALs brought with them a piece of technology that would prove to be the key to Sarah's rescue, a portable plasma cutting system that could slice through stone and metal with precision while minimizing vibrations that might trigger additional collapses. The system used a high-temperature plasma arc that could cut through materials that were too hard or thick for conventional tools. More importantly, the SEALs had experience with what they called surgical extractions in unstable environments. Their training in combat zones had taught them how to work quickly and efficiently in dangerous conditions, where speed could be as important as caution. Commander Morrison worked closely with Maria Valdez to develop a new rescue plan that combined the structural engineer's knowledge of the collapse with the SEAL's operational expertise. They decided to use the plasma cutting system to create a precisely sized escape route that would minimize structural disruption while providing enough space for Sarah to be safely extracted. The operation began at dawn on the 19th day of Sarah's imprisonment. The SEAL team worked with military precision, each operator assigned a specific role in the extraction process. While some team members prepared the cutting equipment, others established safety lines and prepared medical evacuation procedures for when Sarah was finally brought to the surface. The plasma cutting process was fascinating to watch. The high-temperature arc could slice through stone blocks like a hot knife through butter, creating clean cuts that didn't generate the vibrations and stress fractures that conventional tools produced. However, the work still required extreme precision to avoid damaging the structural integrity of the remaining debris field. As the SEALs worked, Sarah's condition continued to decline, despite the medical supplies that had been lowered to her. 20 days underground had pushed her body to its absolute limits. She was experiencing kidney problems from prolonged dehydration, muscle wasting from malnutrition, and respiratory issues from breathing stale air for an extended period. Medical personnel, monitoring her condition through the communication line, warned that she might not survive much longer without proper medical treatment. The race was now against time, with Sarah's failing health adding urgency to every decision the rescue team made. The SEAL team worked through the night, using portable lighting systems to illuminate their work area. The plasma cutting system allowed them to work much faster than previous methods. but they still had to proceed carefully to avoid triggering a collapse that would undo weeks of progress. By the morning of the 20th day, the SEALs had created an opening large enough for a person to fit through. However, the escape route was not a straight vertical shaft, but rather a complex path through the debris field that would require Sarah to navigate several tight spaces and changes in direction. Given Sarah's weakened condition, it was clear that she would not be able to make the journey unassisted. Commander Morrison made the decision to send one of his team members down into the chamber to help with the extraction. Petty Officer First Class Maria Santos, a combat medic with experience in confined space operations, volunteered for the dangerous descent. Santos was lowered into the burial chamber through the escape route the team had created, carrying medical equipment and a special extraction harness designed for evacuating injured personnel from tight spaces. When she reached Sarah, she was shocked by what she found. Despite her ordeal, Sarah had managed to organize and protect many of the archaeological artifacts she had discovered. Even while fighting for her life, she had maintained her scientific discipline, carefully documenting her observations and ensuring that the ancient treasures were preserved for future study. This dedication to her profession, even in the face of death, impressed the hardened SEAL operator. Santos quickly assessed Sarah's medical condition and began administering IV fluids and medications to stabilize her for the journey to the surface. Sarah was conscious but extremely weak, barely able to speak above a whisper. Her pulse was rapid and thready, indicating severe dehydration and stress on her cardiovascular system. The extraction process itself was incredibly complex. Santos had to essentially carry Sarah through the narrow, winding escape route that the team had created through 20 feet of debris. The journey required multiple rest stops, careful navigation of tight spaces, and constant monitoring of Sarah's vital signs. Above ground, the rescue team had prepared for every possible complication. Medical personnel stood ready with advanced life support equipment, and a helicopter was standing by to evacuate Sarah to a hospital in Guatemala City as soon as she reached the surface. After what seemed like hours but was actually about 90 minutes, Santos finally emerged from the escape route with Sarah secured in the extraction harness. The moment they reached the surface, Sarah was immediately surrounded by medical personnel who began intensive treatment for dehydration, malnutrition, and exposure. Sarah's first words upon reaching the surface, spoken in a voice barely above a whisper, were not about her ordeal, but about the incredible archaeological discoveries she had made in the burial chamber. Even after 21 days buried alive, her passion for her work remained undiminished. The immediate medical priority was stabilizing Sarah's condition for transport to a proper medical facility. She was suffering from severe dehydration, malnutrition, muscle atrophy, and several infections that had developed during her imprisonment. However, doctors were amazed by her overall condition, crediting her survival to her rationing discipline and the fortunate discovery of the honey and water sources. Sarah was airlifted to Hospital Roosevelt in Guatemala City, where she spent 2 weeks recovering from her ordeal. The crystallized honey that had kept her alive was analyzed and found to be over 1,000 years old, but still nutritionally viable due to honey's unique preservation properties. The seepage water, while containing some bacteria, had provided just enough hydration to keep her kidneys functioning. The rescue operation had taken 21 days and involved over 50 personnel from multiple countries and organizations. The successful extraction was hailed as a triumph of international cooperation and human determination. Commander Morrison and his SEAL team received commendations for their role in the rescue, while Maria Valdez and the civilian rescue workers were recognized for their expertise and dedication. Most importantly, Sarah's survival allowed her to share the incredible archaeological discoveries she had made in the burial chambers. The site was later fully excavated under controlled conditions, revealing one of the most significant collections of Mayan artifacts ever discovered. Sarah's documentation during her imprisonment proved invaluable to understanding the site's historical significance. The artifacts included astronomical instruments that advanced understanding of Mayan scientific knowledge, burial goods that revealed new information about their religious practices, and hieroglyphic texts that provided insights into their writing system. The discovery fundamentally changed archaeological understanding of Mayan civilization and established Sarah as one of the leading experts in her field. Sarah eventually made a full recovery from her physical ordeal, though the psychological impact of spending 3 weeks buried alive required extensive therapy. She returned to fieldwork within a year, though she never again worked alone in confined spaces. The experience had taught her the importance of safety protocols and backup systems in archaeological exploration. The emergency beacon that had transmitted her location for 21 days straight became a symbol of hope and perseverance. The device was later displayed in the Smithsonian Institution as part of an exhibit about survival against overwhelming odds. Sarah often spoke about how technology, human determination, and international cooperation had combined to save her life. The Guatemalan site was eventually developed into a major archaeological research center, with Sarah serving as the director of excavations. The burial chamber where she had been trapped was preserved as part of the site museum, complete with the crystallized honey vessels that had saved her life. Sarah's story became an inspiration to archaeologists around the world, demonstrating both the risks and rewards of pursuing knowledge about ancient civilizations. Her 21 days buried alive had not only tested the limits of human endurance, but had also led to one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the modern era.